Hello everyone and welcome to the Animezilia, and today we're here to talk about Astra Lost in Space episode 12. Now this is the final episode of the series and it was a magnificent episode at that. It was a bit sad, I will admit, to see a good series finally end, but all good things must come to an end. Now, before I get started with this review, I do want to say that the way I'm adding images and editing is going to slightly be different than my usual style. Hopefully it works out. If not, well, I'll try and go back to the other. Again, I've got no internet, so it's a bit difficult for me to use my video editing software. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the final episode of Astra Lost in Space. So, we start off with a nice touching scene with the crew showing us that they're still accepting Charles, despite what he has done. I mean, yes, they're angry and upset with the guy, and who can blame them? But for the most part, they can all sympathise with his upbringing. Because he had one of the worst upbringings. Because he was the king's clone. Now, Courterine does kind of tease him a bit, but that's just her way of kind of coping with her anger and her rage. She's a bit snarky, which is alright for a character. But yeah. Now, what I did like about this as well is that we have Carnator come in and he's still pretty in bad shape. Remember, he lost an arm and he basically goes up to the crew and goes, look, you guys have to work together. You gotta get along because if not, then, fight me. I've got one arm, but I'll still take you on. And the crew aren't hostile towards Charles, which is great. And Charles is actually emotional at this point. I'm not gonna lie, this episode actually made me enjoy Charles's character more than I have throughout the entire series. It's because Charles has actually become a character himself and isn't someone that views himself as a clone, which is something I really did like about this, but it's a shame it came in the last episode. I like this opening scene because of the Carnator stuff, and it was good, but the other thing I will say that they didn't do that I disliked is the "I yeah" part. So in the manga, the "I yeah" scene in this part was absolutely hilarious because you have Carnator basically falling on the floor due to the loss of blood that he's got. He's dizzy, and everyone's going "I yeah" because they've got to salvage stuff, and he joins in. Hopefully you can see it. But you can see the little stump being pointed to there. Yes, that's a bit of a sick humour, I suppose, but it's something that the manga did that I really enjoyed, and they didn't do it in the anime. Now, my first thought about this was, maybe they're leaving out comedy, but no, they're not leaving out comedy, because we have other scenes with Carnator basically falling down and it's kind of goofy faces and it's not as serious as I think the show is trying to be. So why they left this out, I think it was just because they didn't want to animate it, but if we had seen that, it would have been really cool. Now, we get another scene with Carnator and Ares. This episode had a lot of sort of like shipping moments for those two characters, which I did like because, I like the two characters. And, well, from the hand-holding and to this scene, it all kind of went together nicely. And, the crew have got all their supplies and travels. Carnator's been bored because he's been bed-rested. So Ares goes to visit him. And what I liked about this bit is that it was very beautifully animated and the music was mellow, which set the tone to be really nice and calming. And the dialogue with them talking about their time spent travelling was really nice and touching. The comedy thrown in as Ares gets some words wrong came back and it was actually quite pleasant. Now then, it's story time. As we know, Earth had a meteorite heading towards it. So they miraculously found the planet Astra. Or in this case, the planet they dubbed the name Astra. It was very similar to Earth, we know this, but the Royal Vixia Quarters is said to be the safeguard place that holds the world's secrets. So this is why Charles knows it, and obviously the king's passed down this information and this secret throughout the generations. And it's said that both objects and humans can travel through the wormholes to get to Astra or to get to Earth, because there's a link between the two. But then the problem came when they told the world about the mass population migration to another planet. People began to fight over land, leading to half of humanity being killed off. Now, after this, the humans of that time vowed to never let these incidents repeat themselves. This was a disaster that was on a massive scale. Like I said, it killed half the world population. And, people are still feeling the effects. So, how did they do this? They had the idea to basically have no differences. So, no continents, no languages, well, everyone just has one language, and no religion. Basically, everything that causes war or violence is removed. And then they start to transportate the world's population to Astra, which apparently took 4 years. Which, if any longer, they would have been hit by the meteorite, so good thing they pulled their finger out. Now, another interesting bit of information that we get told in this part is that the wormholes were said to have all been destroyed after they moved. But the Vixar Industries secretly kept one, and then they removed all of the wormholes that were part of the plan, so they could remove the idea from history. They didn't want anyone knowing about the other Earth. But what I say is interesting about the Vixars basically removing all of the wormholes apart from one is because they need one wormhole to basically know how to create more. That's how Charles had more. But they were going to take away and make people forget about the old Earth. But how? Well, the first generation of Astra residents were determined to not let things play out the same way again. So they all agreed to roll back time. That's right, they basically changed the history books and said that, they're now living 100 years in the past, so it makes it kind of believable that civilization would advance as far as it has done. Because basically they're moving objects that are from a futuristic civilization to a planet that doesn't have anything like buildings or housing or electricity. And obviously, 6 years, people would be like, something doesn't add up here. So they basically changed the calendar. Now, they also mention that they don't even talk about the old world. No one is allowed to talk about it or does talk about it. It basically becomes almost taboo to speak of. So this just shows the dedication of the residents of the first generation of Astra. And honestly, you couldn't blame them because they were fighting for peace in doing this. But at the same time, it's kind of bad that they're keeping a big secret from the world. So take that as you will. However, we do realise later on in the episode that the kids, when they come back, they do expose that secret. And there are a lot of problems, which I'll get to in a second. Right then. So, the part where the kids are being escorted home was fantastic. Oh, that was the wrong image. So, these kids are being escorted home, and there's a lot of emotion going around. There's joy, there's sadness, there's gratitude, and they're all basically showing their appreciation for their captain, as they've all noted that if it wasn't for Canada, they wouldn't be where they are today. Which is true, but they all did play a role, and personally I like each character on board the Astra. I think each character has had good time and good development to be flushed out, and that I honestly can say I don't dislike any of them. I mean, my two least favourites, if I had to say, were probably Paulina and Yunha, but that's me being critical. Now, before they get to it, they do kind of think of a plan. Because they need a plan to kind of expose their originals and to get everyone to be on board with what they want, what they say. So they contact Emma. And then they do also get the originals arrested with the assistance from a friend of Luger's brother, which is this guy. And basically, this is a really smart way to do it. I love the fact that it was very thought out and very elaborated, that it makes sense. And it makes sense that these kids are actually smart enough to think about doing this. Because if they got there and the originals were still about, they would be after them, like, from the get-go. But if they arrest them before they come down, then that means they're safe to tell their story. No one can basically cover anything up. And it's also worth noting that we also learn that a man named Mark Vix was the one who killed Seri back in Charles's flashback. This Mark Vix was basically wanting to have the throne, and he knew that if he got rid of Seri, then he would be next in line. Now then, the other plan to tell the world the truth. And it was basically quite exciting to see, but it was exactly what I expected. As it should, and it did, cause major uproar with the population, because the government was keeping the secret from them. And thanks to some persuasion from Carnota, the government did that, and it led to these results. But then Carnota basically wrote a book. I don't really think he wrote it, because Carnota. And basically, this book contained a message within it that resonated with the public, that caused the uproars to die down a bit. And that was great, because the message was all about seeing the world with your own eyes and making up your own views and thoughts. And yeah, I'm still recording. For some reason it doesn't look like I'm recording. Right, so then we do learn what the kids are doing after this event. Coulterine became a model, and so did Charles. But Charles is more popular than Coulterine, which I thought was quite funny. And the other thing is that after a lot of things had passed and time had passed, Charles actually became the king and basically opened the castle doors for the most part and told people the secrets. He allowed people to come in and see everything, because the Royal Vixer quarters was said to hold the old world secrets, so he was able to kind of share that with the public. But what I loved about the most with this section of the episode was the outfits that the crew basically used. So, Charles becoming king, and then the outfits. The outfits that the crew got given were basically the school outfits, but they're very kind of well presented and nicely done. I like the design, all looks smart, all looks kind of good on the characters. As well as that, the comedy throughout this part was actually really funny. I love the fact is, as you can see in this photo, Ares is looking pretty kind of embarrassed. And that's because a reporter basically asked them, what was starvation like? What was everything like that? Tell us. And she goes, I put on 2 pounds of weight. That's what she was embarrassed of. I thought that was pretty cool, and, props to them for doing it. Now then, we get a 7-year time skip. So we flash forward 7 years into the future, and we get to see the cast after all this time. So first of all, we see Luca. Luca is looking pretty dapper, and he visits his original and tells them that everyone has new birth certificates, which basically means that, he's not related to any of them anymore, which is pretty cool. And he now drives around interviewing people as a journalist. And it's unclear if he's settled down with anyone, but he is pretty friendly with Funi, and Luca does make kind of a bit of a gesture about him crashing at her place or his place quite a few times during the week. So make that as you will. I don't think he got with Funi because, the age department would be a bit wrong. But who knows? This is 2019. Next, we'll talk about Funi and Paulina. So, Paulina is now the teacher at the school that the kids used to attend, and Funi is attending the school that her sister attended and everybody else. And Funi does look a lot like her sister, but just with a ponytail instead of pigtails. But honestly, I like the designs, and Paulina's got more of a mature look to herself, and the joke about her being 142. It's... What's the phrase I'm looking for? Ignorance is bliss, or children will be children? Because Funi is the one that kind of jokes about that being the case. And she does this on the Astra 7 years prior as well, which, that was a comedic scene with Paulina basically realizing she just aged 100 years. Pretty cool. Next, we'll move on to the females. So after this 7 year skip, we see what Quiltreline looks like. And Quiltreline and Luca, well, they're not looking too bad. Not my personal choice, but nevertheless, still pretty good characters. And I like the fact that Luca has kind of decided to choose which gender he/she wants to be. Maybe not fully, but it looks like Luca is taking on more of a female appearance, judging from what we see at the end of this episode. And you know what? Luca could be pretty much either or, but if he's trying to get with Luca, then who knows, maybe. Next, Aries. Aries is Asian, she does look a lot like Sari, but, she's got that mature look now, and what I really liked about this scene was the fact that, we learn a bit more about her and Carlos' relationship. They are actually going out, and they are getting married, so they're not married, but they are, and they plan on having a kid later on down the road. The one thing I will say, though, is that the way that Carlos kind of approached the whole marriage situation was a bit creepy and weird. Because what he does is he goes up to Charles and asks if he can marry his daughter. Now, if they're trying to become their own person, like they've been saying throughout the whole last 3 or 4 episodes, then Carnita referring to Aries as being Charles' daughter because of the original relation is kind of weird and out of place. I guess they did it for comedy, and it is very Carnita-like to do something goofy like that. I just found it a little bit weird. So then we'll move on to Yunha. Yunha obviously wanted to become a singer, and she does just that. She sings pretty nicely, and she sings a new song at the end of this episode, Away with Astra or something about her travels, because she expresses the fact that she grew and developed and found her sense of self while she was on this journey. Everyone in this episode does that, and that's what I like. Each character had different roles and different bits and pieces and spotlights without this series that they can look back on in this episode and say, yes, I've evolved and I've become who I am today thanks to that. And then we'll move on to Carnita. Not too much to say about Carnita. Yeah, I just realised I haven't got an image of Charles. Charles and what's his name? Zach. Nope, that's not the right one. We see Charles. I know, very professional. But yeah, we see Charles. And then we see... we see Zach first, but... because I can't find it. There we go. Then we see Zach. Both characters are pretty cool, and we get some comedy in this part as well. So basically, Carlisa has a prosthetic arm, and it can shoot missiles, apparently. Not sure about that, but I would like to see it. But basically, this time skip was done brilliantly, as the use of transitions and animation and music helped get the feelings across that they wanted to show. The dialogue was fitting and funny, especially with Kanata being able to shoot missiles like I just mentioned, and I'd like to have seen that. And overall, this was a fantastic final episode to the series of Astra Lost in Space, and a brilliant way to end off the show. And the animation was beautiful throughout this episode, as I've mentioned in past episodes, that you can't tell that Ares' eyes are different colour, but this episode you can see that in every shot that she's in. And overall, the way that they've handled the plot and the way that they've kind of explained everything and laid it all out, it was written pretty well and decently. It was handled fantastically, and they did a smart job in doing so. So overall, I really did enjoy this, and, each character felt like they had a proper conclusion by the end of this episode. And honestly, I didn't find it rushed at all. The 48 minutes was a smart runtime, adding them both together. All in all, a brilliant series with a couple of problems here and there, but nothing too big, and well worth the watch if you haven't. But honestly, if you haven't watched it yet and this is your first review, probably a bit of a spoiler. But other than that, I want to hear what you have to say in the comment section below. I know this review has run on a bit long, but I have had to, basically cover an hour episode. So, with that out of the way, let me know what your thoughts in the comments. I might have missed a few things. If I have, I'll have to go back and rewatch it, because I watched it on my phone, which, little screen, because I've got no internet, so I had to use my data. Oh well. But anyway, guys, I hope you've all enjoyed. If you have, make sure to smash that like button. Subscribe if you're new so you never miss a video from me. And this layout probably won't stay into, like the whole adding images this way, but it might just be a temporary kind of solution. Let me know your thoughts on that as well. I'll catch you next time. Bye bye.